Hello everyone, today we have SAP Math problem solving and data analysis with inference from sample statistics and margin of error. Unlike usual, we only have a set of 4 problems today, mainly because this topic is a bit more scarce than the other ones, so it's quite difficult to find the problems. So I guess we'll get started with our first question. And our first question states, in a study of cell phone use, 799 randomly selected US teens were asked how often they talked on a cell phone and about their texting behavior. The data, is summarized in the table above. Based on the data from the study, an estimate of the percent of US teens who are heavy texters is 30%, and an associated margin of error is 3%. Which of the following is a correct statement based on the given margin of error? Okay, so what is a margin of error? So what a margin of error is, say it's 55% of them are heavy texters. It's not in this situation. With a margin error of say 5%, right? So what this means is that it's 55% plus or minus 5%, okay? So it's just basically giving you a range of what the possible values are. It could be between 60 to 50, in other words. So what does that mean here? It says 30% are heavy texters with an associated margin of 3%. So that means that it could be 30%, yes, but it could also be 30 plus or minus 3%. Oh, and by plus or minus, I am using it to define the range. It does not mean it can only be 27, 30, or 33, okay? It's just a range between 27 to 33. Okay, so what are the answer choices here? Approximately 3% of the teens in the study who are classified as heavy texters are not really heavy texters. That could be true. If it was minus 3%, that is true. But it could also be, 3% extra are, actually also heavy texters and they're just not reporting it properly, right? So we can keep answer choice A out for now, but we can move on to the next question. Next answer choice. Our next answer choice says B. It is not possible that the percentage of all US teens who are heavy texters is less than 27%. This one is actually incorrect. And the reason for this is because this range is more of probability, okay? So the range of 27 to 33, it's most likely within this range. However, it is not required to be in this range. So this is actually incorrect. It is not required. Option choice C is the percent of all US teens who are heavy texters is 33%. Again, this is kind of like option choice A. It could be 33% if the margin of error is just plus, right? But it doesn't have to be. And then part D is it is doubtful that the percentage of all US teens who are heavy texters is 35%. Okay, so the maximum value in our range, I guess, is 33%, right? 35% is above 33%. And as I said earlier, it's not that it isn't possible, it's just that it's really unlikely. So that means that the answer choice is D. And that's our answer choice, and let's move on to our next question. There. Our next question says, the results of 2 random samples of votes for a proposition are shown above. The samples were selected from the same population, and the margin of error were calculated using the same method. Which of the following is the most appropriate reason that the margin of error for sample A is greater than the margin of error for sample B? Okay. Well, if we look at the answer choices, we see here that, so if we look at the answer choices, we have A. Simple A, it has a smaller number of votes that could not be recorded. Simple B, simple A has a higher percentage of favorable responses. C, sample A has the largest sample size. And D, sample A has a smaller sample size. Okay. So Um, Margin of error is not calculated using stuff that could not be recorded. Okay, that's not how margin of error is calculated. It's calculated using the data set that we already have. So answer choice A can be ruled out. Sample A has higher percentage of favorable responses. Again, that's not the way that it works, right? So margin of error shows the uncertainty in your data set. It does just because something's more favorable in one area does not mean that it's less accurate. So answer choice B is also incorrect. Sample A has a larger sample size. Okay, that's actually the opposite way. Because if you have a larger sample size, okay, think of it this way. If you have a jar, and inside there are multiple different types of marbles, right? Right? Say there is two red marbles, okay, and three green ones, okay? So if a person picks out one of the marbles and gets a red one, okay, there's going to be one red one left. Okay, and say the person picks another one out and gets the other red one. Okay, so using that, it could be assumed that all of the marbles are actually red, right? Meanwhile, if you pick out three marbles, it's more likely that you can see, oh no, the jar is actually made out of red and green marbles. So actually having a larger sample size reduces accuracy. Having a larger sample size increases accuracy. So that means I would decrease the margin of error. That's probably not the best example I could have used, but yeah. So this is actually incorrect. Rather, having a larger sample size makes it more accurate. So that means the answer choice is D, because decreasing the sample size makes the margin of error larger, since it's less accurate. Moving on to our third question, it states, in State X, Mr. Camp's 8th grade class, consisting of 26 students, was surveyed, and 34.6% of the students reported that they had at least two siblings. The average 8th grade class size in the state is 26. If the students in Mr. Camp's class are representative of students in the state's 8th grade classes, and there are 1,800 8th grade classes in the state, which of the following best estimates the number of 8th grade students in the state who have fewer than two siblings? Okay. So, what does this mean? This means that what we need to do here is we see that there's 34.6% of students had at least two siblings. We're looking for having fewer than two siblings. So if the total percentage is 100%, then 100% minus 34.6% will be equal to having fewer than two siblings. And then this would be equal to, if I am correct with my math, 65.4%. Let's see. Yep, 65.4%. And this is the percentage that we need to have. And Mr. Camp's class has 26 students, right? And how many students are there in state X? Well, there's 1,800 8th grade classes, and each of these has around 26 students, right? So that means the sample size, the population of state X is 1,800 times 26 divided by 26. So that means that Mr. Clean's camp size, it would take 1,800 of Mr. Camp's 8th grade class, 8th grade class, in order for it to represent the state. And moreover, since we know that students in Mr. Camp's class are representative of the students in the state's 8th grade classes, this means the proportions are going to be about the same. So all we need to do now is multiply 1,800 by 65.4. Doing this, we get, but before we do that, we need to do something. Remember, this 65.4% is actually the percent of students that have less than two siblings. However, this is in Mr. Clean's, or sorry, I keep calling him Mr. Clean, but it's Mr. Camp's 8th grade class. So what we need to do is multiply this times 26, because that is the number of students in Mr. Camp's 8th grade class. Doing this, we get a value of around, let me check my calculator. I believe it's 17. And once we multiply this, we get a value of 30,600 approximately. The actual value is actually just, it's the same value. It's just 30,600. And that would be our answer. Even I got a little bit tripped up in this problem. And sometimes that's why you need to read the problem really carefully. Only by doing that can you make sure to get all of these problems correct. And this is a bit more difficult than what you'll see in the SAT. However, it's still good to practice questions that are a bit harder than what will be actually appearing in order for you to be prepared. Our last question is, the table shows the results of a poll. A total of 803 voters selected at random were asked which candidate they will vote for in the upcoming election. According to the poll, if 6,424 people vote in the election, by how many votes would Angel Cruz be expected to win? Okay. Well, look at what we're being asked here. We're not being asked what's the number of votes that each candidate will get. We're asking by how many votes would Angel Cruz be expected to win. So, if you look here, Angel Cruz has 483, and Terry Smith has 320. In this population, Angel Cruz will have 163 more votes than Terry Smith. The total number of voters is 803. So we divide this by 803. We get a percentage, or we get a decimal value of, I believe, 0.203. Yeah, well, 0.2029. But that's approximately 203. So this is the the decimal value by which Angel Cruz would be expected to win. Okay, and given that this is a random selection, it is highly likely that these 803 voters can represent the entire population size. So what we would need to do is multiply this times the total population, which is 6,424, and we would get a value of 1,304. Yeah, and that would be our answer for this problem. Of course, another way you could have done it is by calculating the votes that Angel Cruz would have won with the total population of 6,424, and then doing the same for Terry Smith and then subtracting them. But I find out that this method is quite a bit more simpler and saves you a lot of time in your calculations. So just by doing this, you can save a lot of time in your SAT and move on to questions that are more difficult, or you can just progress more quickly. So that's all I have for today. Since we don't have much problems in this topic, I could only get 4. But that's all, and thank you so much.